Debate right here inside of our studios on the northwest side of Indianapolis. We're hosting the Republican and Democratic candidates hoping to lead our state. To be with us here this evening. And with the rules set, we now want to begin the debate with
going to be hard to do that because I did it through practical experience. So we need to make sure that we bring into the state that stratum of wages through our economic development that's going to pay that highest wage. We need to make sure we fertilize the field of entrepreneurs because they oftentimes are that next best business that grow wages and opportunities for hardworking Hoosiers.
Ms. McCormick, 60 seconds to you. How would you raise wages in Indiana?
Yes, I will get to that question. But first of all, I am Jennifer McCormick. I am a fifth-generation farm family. I am also a teacher. I am a businesswoman, and I was your last elected state superintendent of public instruction as a Republican. I am a wife, and I am a proud mom. Also, too, I am a Hoosier, and I am proud of that. And I know, just like many of you, we deserve a governor we can trust and who we can like, one we can bring common sense and restore balance, but also, too, someone who will fight for our freedoms, and I will do that for all Hoosiers. As far as the question goes, I am very proud we released our common sense education economic development plan, which included ways to get down utility costs, which included ways to get down healthcare costs and increase our talent pool of workers in order to attract and retain good paying jobs and get those wages up. So what we did is we took an approach to make it business friendly, but also make it Hoosier friendly and to make sure that Hoosiers are included in the plan. And again, it goes back to getting those utility costs down for everyone and also healthcare costs.
Just to follow up here in 30 seconds, would you consider raising Indiana's minimum wage?
Absolutely. I know the Democrats have tried that several times at the State House unsuccessfully, but it's time. But I'll be honest with you, even if we raise it, it becomes what is that threshold? You know, it's $15 an hour really doesn't go very far right now. So it gets back to it's a much bigger conversation than that.
And Mr. Braun, 30 seconds to you quickly. Would you consider raising the minimum wage in our state?
I would consider it, but what I would be mostly for is making sure that we've got the right mix of businesses from small, medium, and large, and knowing what economic development is about. I did that for 37 years in the real world, signing the front side of a paycheck. I think it'll be easy for me to figure out how to do that.
We just mentioned the next governor's pay raise, and that was passed in the legislative session without Hoosier voters' input. And we've heard from so many of our viewers who are upset that they really feel voiceless on major state policy issues, things like legalizing marijuana or abortion access. So first to you, Ms. McCormick, would you support efforts to send these public issues directly to voters on the ballot? 30 seconds for you.
Absolutely. We have a common sense ethics plan that includes making sure Hoosiers have a voice, and that is absolutely part of it, to make sure that we fight for ballot initiatives so the majority of Hoosiers can make those decisions that we're seeing being made by a very, very small minority of Hoosiers. Also, that ethics plan makes sure that we are being transparent and held accountable.
Mr. Braun, we turn the question now to you. Would you support ballot referendums in your administration? 30 seconds.
So we currently don't have that. And to me, the best way you're going to see what Hoosiers want, visit them. For the nearly 6 years I've been in the Senate, I visit every county all 92 of them, have 4 left this year. And you learn a lot. If the legislature, if there was an upswell for it, I would not rule it out. But the best way to keep your pulse on what's going on, talk to Hoosiers. I've got a track record where I've done that now for 6 years and will continue to do that as the next governor.
I want to stay connected to the topic we were talking about because abortion and state ballot referendums often go hand in hand. It also ranked as one of the top concerns we heard from viewers. Recently, former President Trump weighed in on this issue, pointing back to state rights as well as voter voices on the matter. Here's what he had to say in a Fox News interview.
You need more time than 6 weeks. I've disagreed with that right from the early primaries. When I heard about it, I disagreed with it.
Mr. Braun, if he's saying that a 6-week ban is too short, Indiana's abortion law is more restrictive than the leader of your party supports, would you back any changes or any further exceptions to Indiana's abortion law?
So we're a right to life state, and that sanctity of life gets weighed against the counterpoint. And when our legislature took it on, they talked to their constituents, to Hoosiers, and it's withstood the courts weighing in. So it is a bill that sanctifies life. We're a state that does that with reasonable exceptions. And I think the people have spoken, the legislators listened, and we got a bill that seems to be working for Hoosiers.
Let's turn this now to you, Ms. McCormick. You've promised to overturn the state's abortion ban if elected. As a Democrat who most likely would be working alongside a Republican supermajority in the state house, how would you overturn the law and get bipartisan support to do so? And you have 60
I
seconds
don't know
for
how
that.
any elected official could say it's working because we have women already dying in Indiana and we have stories being told every day and are being reported on. I'm the only person on the stage who's been pregnant. I'm the only person on this stage who's given birth. I'm the only person on this stage who is a mom, and I understand firsthand the complexities associated with pregnancy. And I trust women. I trust healthcare providers. I believe in the standards that were set by Roe. It's time we return that. There is too much at stake. I know my opponent said that that he thought we got it right. And when you make comments like that, we put a lot of women's lives at risk. It's complex. I'm also concerned about IVF and birth control. As I know a lot of people say it's not at risk. When you leave that up to the states, we have seen time and time again that it has become at risk. We have plenty of examples to point to. Again, I trust women, and there are a lot of Hoosiers who are with me on this issue.
And so you've spoken here about your stance, but specifically the question was about how you would overturn the law. So what steps would you take? 15 seconds to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything we can do with our boards and our commissions and our agencies, working with the General Assembly as well, but anything we can do under our authority, and we will look at every step we can take in order to work toward that.
Ms. McCormick, thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got a lot of topics to get to tonight, including a number dealing with the economy. And one area where Hoosiers have been hardest hit is with housing. The high federal interest rates brought up mortgage payments. Zillow reports that rent prices have gone up by as much as 30% year over year here in Indiana. Ms. McCormick, you've suggested incentivizing affordable housing and ensuring better protections for renters. What are those incentives, and how would your overall policies help Hoosiers afford a place to live? 60 seconds.
Yeah, well, as I've traveled the state, I've learned from a lot of people, whether they're homeowners or renters, that first of all, they're trying to stay in where they are already located. And that goes back to property taxes. We put out a common sense property tax relief plan that will hopefully help Hoosiers stay in place. My plan was successfully received. Mr. Braun had to go back a few times and do 2.0, but our plan really does help keep Hoosiers in their household. In addition, those incentives look like they could do fair lending practices, making sure that we're doing some small grants to keep first-time homeowners into or get them into homes. But there's so much that work that needs to be done in that space of home ownership. You know, there's so much more that goes with that. When you stay in one place, you also have more stability in your workforce. You have more stability in our education, and you have healthier people. So the housing piece, we definitely need to solve those issues.
Mr. Braun, you've pointed to government support for multifamily housing and collaborations with local builders. How would your policies help Hoosiers afford a place to live? 60 seconds to you on this question.
Well, number one, let's look at why it started in the first place. Her party promoted Bidenomics, the inflation that we got that took assessed values through the roof. We didn't have that up until just recently. You got to go back 40 years. It would have been close to when I was starting a business. We never had inflation that bad. And when you do that, it's going to throw everything out of kilter. And in the case of property taxes, no one spoke up until I did. I was the first to lay out a property tax plan. And it's very simple. You should not grow taxes faster than the ability of a Hoosier to pay for it. And if we're not for home ownership, especially among young couples and the elderly that suffer the most with actually paying that bill, and we don't give some security to folks that it's not going to increase in the future, we put a cap on it so it can't do it on the bill because it wasn't working the way it was. I'm proud of it.
Okay,
Since he addressed my party, can I?
15 seconds here to respond. Yeah.
So I agree with some of the things Mr. Braun said about, you got to keep pace with that. But under 20 years of one party rule, and that is Republicans, your party, sir, that has gotten us to the place we are with property taxes being out of control.
Let's stay on this topic of property taxes here, Mr. Braun. One Ball State economist called your plan to cut property taxes a, quote, catastrophe for local governments and schools that rely on that tax money. You told me in a recent interview that in some cases, communities may have to make the case for additional projects. Does that mean cities would need to take some of these funding issues directly to the voters if they want to build a new park or a new fire station? 60 seconds.
There's no school board member or even administrator or local government official that will ever say that you should grow revenues faster than the ability for a taxpayer to pay it. I was on a school board for 10 years, served on the education committee 1 year of the 3 years in the State House, and have been on health, education, labor, and pensions out east. So we need to make sure, because local government and school districts are the most important part of our state's government and education. What I'm doing is just simply saying, don't ask the taxpayers for more than what they can afford to do. Don't have policies that are going to kick them out of their homes when we know that it's important for young and old couples and everyone in between. And I'll find ways, if there's more need for revenue, you can do it through a referendum. If you need more, you can use local income taxes, but do it transparently. Don't put a big increase on the shoulders of Hoosiers without them knowing it.
Ms. McCormick, let's talk about the analysis on your property tax proposal, which some analysts say could have a similar impact on local governments, costing as much as $175 million in lost revenue, according to some forecasts. You've suggested making that up by pulling from the state's surplus. How sustainable is that solution? Would that ultimately impact other sections of the state's budget? 60 seconds to you as well.
Yeah, we've had a great response from our plan. People understood where we were going with it. We pulled in a bipartisan fashion. We pulled language from Republicans and bill language from legislation that had been introduced, and also from Democrats. And so in a bipartisan fashion, we pulled the best of the best and put it together. It would have a savings of around $600 million. The fiscal's there, the language there, it's ready day one. It would save all Hoosiers in their property taxes, but it would also protect that local level. I don't want to defund our schools. I don't want to defund our police. I certainly don't want to defund our fire and our parks and our libraries. So ours was a really well-received plan because it offers that relief, but it protects the local level, which is incredibly important.
Let's stay on the topic of schools here, Rochelle.
Yes, you just mentioned some of the funding there for education. We know Hoosier students have been seeing lower test scores and also somewhat stalled education outcomes for almost a decade now. Both of your campaigns have suggested raising teacher wages as part of your education plan to address some of the learning gaps that we're really seeing. Ms. McCormick, you propose starting that teacher salary now at $60,000. Where would the money come from for this higher teacher pay? You have 60 seconds for that.
Yeah, so obviously education is one of my priorities. If we can't get education right, we can't get the economy right. So everything's based on getting that piece of it where we need it. We need a well-trained and educated workforce and a highly skilled and healthy consumer as well. So the education piece obviously is a passion for me, but we got to start with childcare, universal pre-K, get the K-12 piece right, and then the post-high school. Also, too, we do need to pay our teachers the way their non-educator peers are being being paid, or we're never going to attract them. There are 3,300 educator openings today. We will never fill them. School is happening. It completely impacts our communities, our state, and honestly, across the nation. When I was in office, Indiana was ranked 35th in the nation under 20 years of Republican implemented policy. I was responsible to implement a lot of bad policies. Since I left, we have fallen to 41st. So we're going in the wrong direction. I made my concerns heard when I was in office. I will continue to do that because I'll champion for kids.
And so how do you pay for that, though? The $60,000 that you're proposing here for teachers to fill some of the gaps and certainly increase the education outcomes.
Sure.
We'll give you 15 seconds.
Yeah, the majority of the funding comes from the funding formula, which is state dollars. And $1.6 billion right now flows away from public education into privatization. So pausing that program will give us the monies that we need and our teachers deserve.
Mr. Braun, I want to turn now to you with this same question. You've also, again, proposed higher salaries for our teachers without giving a number. How much would you raise teacher pay to, and how would you fund that? 60 seconds for that response.
So that's going to be very simple. If you look at what we invest in a classroom, building, utilities, maintenance, upkeep, including teacher pay, it's about $245,000 per classroom. That means over time, we have lost sight of what is most important. My sister was a 5th grade school teacher for her career, and I know what's important. She'll keep me straight on that. I served on our school board for 10 years. If you're putting that much into buildings and maintenance and upkeep, and you're not getting the most important thing right, which is teacher pay and benefits, to me, $60,000 is way too modest. That's nothing more than what we've done over the last 3 years of stepping it up about $1,500 a year. It's got to be competitive with some of the best wages we pay in the state, and you do it by running things more efficiently, not putting money into the buildings and the operations into the classroom.
So you've just said 60K is too modest. You want to be competitive. So for your sister, who was a 5th grade teacher, or for any others who are watching right now, what can they expect? What is the number that you would raise teacher pay to?
So here's what I'll
seconds.
do. I'll look at what peer states are paying, what the best states are doing across this country that are getting that right mix, and I will aspire to do that. And I can tell you, there's going to be plenty of room to end up paying for it by running a government more efficiently and weighing in on the cost of a classroom.
Thank you, Mr. Braun. Well, you both have touched on this a bit outside of teacher pay, that there are other aspects, other plans that you might use to certainly help our classrooms and keeping teachers in the classroom as well. How will your administration improve the education quality and the outcomes for Hoosier students? We'll start first with you. 30 seconds, Ms. McCormick.
Yeah, so when I was our state superintendent, I was very proud. We have a national leader in school safety, so that is already established and well known across the nation. We've still got room to grow, but that was our number one priority, is the safety and security, which means buildings and construction and making sure our kids are safe, but also too making sure that we're doing our due diligence in all programming prior to when they come into school, from that childcare to pre-K on to K-12 and post high school.
And is there one particular policy now voters can expect from you when it comes to improving those outcomes outside of the security for the buildings? I'll give you 15 seconds.
Absolutely. The investment in early childcare is a huge investment into what we want to accomplish in education. That, I know it's expensive, but it's a huge investment, and our return on that investment is unquestionable.
Mr. Braun, we turn the question similarly to you here. How will your education plan directly help students? 60 seconds for your response.
So it's going to be very clear there. I'm going to make sure that teachers are getting what their resources are they need to choose it as an occupation. I'm also going to make sure that parents are the main stakeholders in their own kids' education. I'm a big believer, because I've seen it in the real world. If you don't have competition and choice, you're going to be pigeonholed into something that, if that's the only thing you've got, what do you measure it against? So parents are clamoring for options and choices that you don't have with a one-size-fits-all. And thank goodness we've gone that direction, because you'd be in some places where you had no options. And all I can tell you is, when you want to be a monopoly, you're generally trying to hide poor performance, and you don't want to compete. Choice and competition works in anything, including healthcare, which we'll talk about a little later, but certainly in education.
We will get to that topic. Thank you, Mr. Braun and Ms. McCormick. Well, for our next question now, we get some help from Mike Tank. He's here at our station, WTWO in Terre Haute.
Utility companies serving Hoosiers like CenterPoint Energy and others across the state have raised utility rates, and many Hoosiers tell us it's more than they can afford. What will your administration do to bring these prices under control?
So first, we turn to you, Mr. Braun. What is your plan to help Hoosiers afford the utilities that they certainly need to survive? We'll give you 1 minute for that response.
So that's become an issue really somewhat recently. As recently as 2 years ago, there was flat demand for electricity. Now every business that wants to come into the state needs, in many cases, a gigawatt of electricity. We only produce 20 gigawatts currently. And again, part of our issue when we were 5th or 6th least expensive in the country, we were relying mostly on coal. I'm for the cleanest, least expensive fuel in the long run. But we shut down our coal fleet too early, and now we're up to being 33rd to 35th in terms of cost of electricity. That's going to be bad for economic development, and it's going to make it hard for us to be attractive to the businesses that use a lot of electricity that want to come into our state. Again, those are decisions that utility companies may be listening too much to things out east that got us in that predicament. I'll make sure to weigh in on it for sure.
I don't quite think I heard the plan, though, to keep those utilities affordable for Hoosiers. So in 15 seconds, could you tell us what that would look like under your administration?
So that would be don't prematurely shut down your base load currently. Find what the least expensive costs are of electricity in the short run, and make sure you're doing it in a way that's going to be entrepreneurial and not dictated from the federal government to us.
Thank you, Mr. Braun. Let's turn now to you, Ms. McCormick. You've laid out a plan to cap rates and put some more oversight over utility companies, but that's also received some pushback, especially concerning the bottom line of these utility companies. So what's your response to that criticism of your plan? 60 seconds.
Our plan is solid. So we rolled out a common sense utility plan that really got to the root of IURC, which is the commission that allows these rate increases at a pace that we've not seen in some time. So making sure that we are putting people on that board that are rate payer friendly versus utility company friendly. Also re-incentivizing one-to-one net metering. So people are looking at renewable energy and having a way to do that. Also, we look at Mitch Daniels' energy savings plan where he incentivized a lot of that. And obviously it was done away with when he left office, but we can bring some of that back. So bringing people to the table that have a lot of great ideas about getting these costs down. But the first step is the IURC, which again is that commission in order to bring those costs down. The other piece of it I want to mention on school choice, I cannot leave this. Indiana school choice program is 100% about school choice and not about parent choice. It's about schools choosing, not parents choosing.
Thank you both. We'll turn now to Dan for our next topic.
Mr. Braun, just this week, your campaign put out an ad that included a digitally manipulated image of your opponent. This is what that image looked like in your ad in the initial version, altering what was seen on these signs in the background of a McCormick campaign event. The ad was initially sent to local TV stations without a disclaimer that the images were altered. Your campaign sent out subsequent versions of this, correcting to add the disclaimer and bring the ad in line with the state's new law, along with another new version of the ad. But even with the disclaimer, the ad still presented an image that never happened in real life. Going beyond this specific campaign spot, are you comfortable with your campaign fabricating images of this nature? 1 minute on this question.
Well, that was amplifying a point, and the only misstep there was that you didn't disclaim it. And that's a recent law that just passed in Indiana. When I saw that, I immediately corrected it. No campaign is going to be perfect, but you do need to get at the underlying substance. And that ad was to point out that my opponent is embracing some of the liberal policies. I don't know that Hoosiers are quite ready for that. You know, when you've been proud of the fact that you voted for Hillary Clinton, I think when she was a Republican back then, and you support the Biden-Harris program that's given us a sugar high economy and inflation, And when you recommend joining a environmental alliance, a climate alliance that espouses those things, I think you either need to say you're for it or against it, because I don't think Hoosiers are ready for that.
Ms. McCormick, I'll give you 60 seconds to respond here. And do you plan to file suit over this?
Well, first of all, I think that response was just so rich. When you're blaming someone else for not having a disclaimer on an ad that is clearly from your campaign. First of all, it's very disheartening to see something that is misleading Hoosiers. We deserve better than that from our elected officials, particularly a sitting senator. So I have never mentioned stoves, and he knows that. And so, you know, there were just a lot of pieces of that that were unfortunate, and it didn't get taken down immediately. The same week, I'm called a Jezebel spirit by the ticket. And when I was an elementary principal, I learned what you do is you admit when you get something wrong and you own it and you apologize. The third step would be to call home. I'm not calling home. But step 1 and 2 can certainly be done from an adult. And so I'm happy to wait on that apology, but it was very misleading. It was it was unnecessary. And it's quite frustrating to see that happen in politics. We deserve better than that. That's why Hoosiers are exhausted by extremism.
Mr. Brown, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond here on this. And
we
the comments
immediately
from your running
responded
mate.
to that and did it as quickly as you can to take it off. And the point is still there. And if you want to espouse those policies, be clear about it. Have your website say you're not for that. And my opponent was the first one that put contrast advertising out there on the issue of abortion. And that had manipulation to it as well. So that is something that if you do it, which that happened, and we took it down immediately, and that's, to me, closes the case.
Ms. McCormick, 30 seconds to you here. The Braun campaign
Yeah.
accusing your team of manipulating images.
Yeah, we
as
didn't
well.
manipulate
30
anything. We
seconds.
used his voice and his message. It was not manipulated. Using artificial intelligence to put other words on and purposely mislead is a whole other ballgame. And again, we never even address your ticket referring to me as a Jezebel spirit, which is beyond the Hoosier values. That is why people are tired of extremism.
And we'll be talking about your running mates and some other big issues in this race for governor coming up here in just a few minutes.
But right now, we do need to take a quick break, so we'll be right back with, of course, more issues and more answers from the candidates Mike Braun and Jennifer McCormick.
Jennifer McCormick.
Back to debate night here in Indiana. We've already covered a lot of ground in the last half hour with our candidates, Jennifer McCormick and Mike Braun, but we still have more to go here with about 30 minutes, so we'll get right into it.
Mr. Braun, former President Trump's endorsement of your campaign was a prominent part of your messaging in the primary, but his name has largely been absent from your advertisements during the general election race. Are you still on board with your party's candidate this year, his approach and his platform as he runs for re-election in 2024? 1 minute here.
Definitely. And this will be an easy one because national races impact down ballot races. And I'd ask Hoosiers, when were you better off? Under the Trump administration or with Bidenomics, inflation, sugar high economy, open border? Almost all of those issues were not issues, including being entangled in a lot of foreign escapades. If you look back to that, That looks pretty good compared to what we have now. Not to mention that we've grown the federal government by 25% under Biden-Harris, my opponent's party, and we're borrowing at the tune of now $1 trillion every 6 months. And to show you how much that party has grown government, it was half that just 6 years ago. We need something better than government growing when you're touting jobs.
Your Senate colleague, Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance, faced a common question about President Trump along these lines in the VP debate last night, and it's a question that many viewers had for you as well. Do you believe President Trump lost the election in 2020? 30 seconds here.
I believe that election had irregularities to it. I think they were investigated, certified the vote, and we're talking about 2024. And we're talking about how bad it's been since they've been in charge. Inflation, high costs, every basic need we have has gotten worse since then.
But to clarify here in 15 seconds, do you believe he lost the election 4 years ago?
I do.
Ms. McCormick, you changed parties from Republican to Democrat. That's been a large part of your campaign this year. Can voters trust that you'll be on board with your new party's platform? 60 seconds to you on that question and your response to Mr. Braun there.
Absolutely. The party has been super supportive. I know Mr. Braun can relate to this as he switched parties as well. He was a Democrat for many years. And so for my party, what we're doing is showing what it looks like to have hope and optimism, to show the future and make sure we're focused on kids and families and communities, to fight for reproductive rights and freedoms, to make sure that kids have a great education and we have childcare and universal pre-K, and we have good paying jobs, and we uplift our unions because they're so incredibly important. But we also need to take care of our environment. So yes, the party and I are aligned to a lot of issues, and they have been very receptive, and I am proud to be a Democrat. But having said that, my campaign has been very bipartisan. We have a lot of Republicans who are supporting us, a lot of independents who are supporting us. And the message they're telling us is we can get behind your values. We do not want extremism. His lieutenant governor scares people to death because he goes around calling candidates, Jezebel spirits. And so people don't want that.
Mr. Braun, 30 seconds to respond to that if you would.
So I think it's clear. This is about kitchen table issues. When I travel the state, they're worried about the economy. The federal government has been run by her party over the last 4 years, and we've got some of the worst economic results we've had ever. And when your game plan is to borrow and spend through the federal government and do it on the backs of your kids and grandkids, we need a better business plan. We don't want that to infiltrate here into Indiana.
And Ms. McCormick, another follow-up here, because you mentioned working in a bipartisan fashion. You were in charge of the Department of Education, as you referenced, for 4 years, clashing many times with Republicans in power on your plans for students. As a Democrat now, how will you enact your policies while working with the majority party, the supermajority at the State House?
Yeah.
30 seconds.
And Mr. Braun mentioned that, my party has been in charge of the federal government for decades. And I will say the state here in Indiana that we're talking about today, that is 47th in the nation in quality of life, 41st in the nation in educational attainment. We can go on, and some of the statistics that are alarming have been under 20 years of one party rule under Republicans. So let's talk about the state of Indiana. As far as when I was state superintendent of public instruction, I did an amazing job because I had an amazing team. I also served amazing school systems.
But 15 seconds here, exactly how would you work with the supermajority to enact some of those policies?
Yeah, and that was a big charge when I was here. They called us the Ellis Island of the State House because our doors were open to everybody to extend that olive branch. We helped on legislative items. We helped on fiscal and implementation items. We will continue to do that. My lieutenant governor served for 20 years, has a relationship with a lot of Republicans, and we'll take advantage of that.
Okay, we'll talk about that coming up as well. More topics to get to, Birchelle.
By next year, every state surrounding Indiana will have legalized marijuana in some form, bringing in some new tax revenue sources. Illinois and Michigan have brought in tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars. Ohio earned more than $11 million in its first week of sales, and Kentucky has brought in $27 million. That's just from applications for medical marijuana applications, or licenses rather. So many of our viewers had questions about marijuana legalization. So Ms. McCormick, first to you. You support overall marijuana legalization. Some law enforcement officers, though, have raised concerns about legalizing the drug, especially when it comes to public safety. What steps would your office take to address those concerns? 60 seconds on the clock for you.
Absolutely. So 80% of the Hoosiers, I hear you, and it is time. We are on an island of our own, and every state around us has legalized and is taking advantage of this. And Hoosiers are using, whether medical or recreational, it's here. So it's time we take advantage. We rolled out our common sense cannabis plan that starts with a well-regulated industry with a commission that we would certainly bring law enforcement to the table to make sure we're doing this in a very thoughtful way. It's a lot of money. Low estimates, $177 million with tens, if not thousands of jobs. What a huge economic boost for the state of Indiana. It's time. So I hear concerns from law enforcement. We are willing to work with them. I appreciate everything they do. And their voice will be certainly at that table when we have our commission in order to get to medical first and then go into adult use.
And what would that partnership look like? How would you address what they're now concerned about, whether it's roadside safety or some of their traffic investigations? 15 seconds if you could.
Yeah, we have to look at the arrest and those who are right now incarcerated. So making sure that they are part of that commission, making sure that their concerns are heard, and making sure that we can find some common ground. I mean, they will be a critical piece to make sure this is successful.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. Mr. Braun, now to you. The last time you were on our debate stage, you signaled that you were open to medicinal marijuana, legalizing it in our state if a bill landed on your desk. So what would that bill need to include now for you to sign it into law? 60 seconds.
So that's going to be very simple. And she referred to the fact that law enforcement is kind of concerned about her approach. I'll be listening to them for sure. They'll have to put up with the consequences of it. I'm an entrepreneur by trade. I build a business having to look at things as they change. And by the way, when it comes to law enforcement, I'm the one here that's been endorsed by the FOP in the State Police Alliance, among many other sheriffs as well. That is critical. We are surrounded by 4 states currently. Many others have already done it. And to me, medical use of marijuana is something, yes, that we need to look at. I hear a lot of that from people across the board. And I will be open to doing what makes sense, not doing what is necessarily politically convenient to do. And again, I'll take a lot of cue from the folks that are already supporting me, law enforcement, that would have to put up with doing it the wrong way.
And just as a quick follow-up to that, so if you have the right resources, you're hearing from experts that they back recreational legalization, is that something you would also sign? 30 seconds.
That is something I'll consider. Medical marijuana is something I think that makes sense, and I'll listen to the legislature. I'll make sure that I get the ear of law enforcement and Hoosiers. Remember, I visit them every year, all 92 counties, and they can come visit me in my hometown, which I'll do when you elect me governor as well.
Thank you. We'll stick a bit with this topic here. Something that's somewhat been connected with marijuana in some cases is opioids. It certainly affected many Hoosiers, including one of our viewers, Angelo from Portage, and he asked this question here.
Back in 2019, my family and I were at a loss when our father suddenly passed away of a drug overdose. So my question is, what is your plan on combating the opioid epidemic in Indiana?
Mr. Braun, I turn to you first on this one. What would you propose for Hoosiers like Angelo when it comes to the overdose epidemic that we're seeing?
Well, sadly, opioids, fentanyl, now which comes across our border due to open border policies, 100,000 lives lost annually. That is way too many across the country. We have our own instances, of course, here in our own state. I was down to visit the border a year and a half ago, and those policies that were working so well under the Trump administration, basically the Biden-Harris plan has been to open the borders. And of course, she has as her biggest issue as the border czar completely dropped the ball. I'd love to hear my opponent's opinion of how well that's worked. Until that is solved, it'll be like chasing your tail as states. But in the meantime, we'll have to do the best to fend it off, but open borders, cartels, Biden-Harris policies have given us that.
Ms. McCormick, I'll give you a moment just to respond to this. But first, Mr. Braun, as a follow-up, Angelo and others have suggested that legalizing marijuana could replace opioid use for some addicts, potentially saving lives. So what would your response be to a proposal like that? 30 seconds.
And to me, if that's part of medical marijuana and a therapeutic way to address those issues, I'm definitely going to be open to it, and we'll listen to it carefully. And that seems to make sense.
Thank you, Mr. Braun. Ms. McCormick, let me turn to you first on the original topics. You've already advocated here for legalizing marijuana for Hoosiers, families like Angelo's. What other solutions do you have to address opioid overdoses? 60 seconds, please, for your response.
Yeah, first of all, my heart goes out to Angelo and his family. It is very, very difficult. And I've heard those type of stories as I've traveled all 92 counties, and it is in all 92 counties. So I appreciate the question. You know, it is a massive undertaking. Let's give credit where credit's due. Governor Holcomb made some good steps forward in this, in looking at trying to find some of those solutions. And I think there are some good steps, whether we look at test stripping or looking at more resources in regional areas where they need to go, empower our departments of health. We've had a lot of great ideas, but again, we have to have the people at the table with those ideas. As far as the borders goes, you know, it's really unfortunate that one of the last bipartisan border patrol bills that was put up that had a lot of money on it, that some said was the most aggressive to control some of the illegal substances coming across the border. My opponent voted no on that bill. And it's unfortunate because it would have helped Indiana. It would have helped with the illegal immigration issue. It also would have helped with the drug issue.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. And I see, Mr. Braun, that you got your hand raised here. We'll give you 30 seconds as a rebuttal.
So that bipartisan bill had 3 Republicans for it. And you know why? Because it would have legalized illegal crossings at 5,000 per day. Half of what the Biden administration was tolerating before, but way too many. And if you're okay with that, you're not getting to the root of the problem, and something's got to give there. Her party was responsible for it. And until we're going to cure this issue, it's going to have to be based upon a secure border.
Well, Mr. Braun and Ms. McCormick have both walked us right into our next topic here, which is immigration.
We've certainly seen a national discussion on immigration this year in the race for president, resulting in some fairly heated rhetoric. Indiana may have its own example of that in the city of Logansport, where a large population of immigrants have come here legally, many to bolster the workforce at places like Tyson Foods. But the city's mayor told us recently that's putting a strain on some systems like healthcare and schools in that area. Ms. McCormick, as governor, what resources would you direct to communities with quickly growing population? 60 seconds here.
Yeah, it's so interesting that Mr. Braun keeps referring to my party in D.C. I wasn't in D.C. I've never served in D.C. He is the gentleman who has been serving us in D.C. for a long time now. He is definitely an insider in Washington, D.C. And what did you get accomplished? I mean, obviously you voted against a very, very popular bipartisan bill. And a lot of people, the perception here from Hoosiers is you were playing politics. And that's unfortunate because we need solutions. Illegal immigration is a huge topic that we need solved at the federal level. Now, obviously, there are ways to do that. And as the governor, I will certainly cooperate with the federal level, regardless of who the president of the United States is, because I want Hoosiers to be safe. And we also need to address the issue. But as far as legal immigration goes, we embrace that. There are 6% of our population that are here in the workforce, bringing over $4 billion into our economy. Many of our communities are dependent upon immigrants who have come here legally and being very, very productive citizens. But as a responsible governor, I will make sure we get resources where they need to go.
Mr. Braun, same question to you here. How will you address the influx of legal migrants in some of our communities and resources that may need to come from the state? 60 seconds.
So legal immigration is something that you'll need more of it. And the reason we haven't gotten it is because you've got a porous border. Again, unless she wants to disavow everything her party stands for, that's what's been in the way of it. But this country was built upon immigration, legal immigration, not open borders. And that issue is right up there with the economy, and they're both bad, and they've both been put upon us by the Biden-Harris administration. So when we have legal immigration and it's in our own state, of course you support it. That's what we need more of. What we need less of is what my opponent and her party have given us in the first place, which is open doors. And that was working well before Biden and Harris got elected. Now all states are border states, and we're putting up with the complications of it.
Let's talk about your running mates here. This came up earlier in the debate. Mr. Braun, your running mate, Micah Beckwith, chosen by party delegates, has raised a number of hot button issues throughout the campaign, including a call to revisit childhood vaccine requirements and some comments about your opponents that Ms. McCormick referenced earlier. You've told me that you prefer the campaign focus on kitchen table issues. How would he impact your administration? And if elected, what role would your LG play in the Braun administration? 1 minute here on this.
So you can pick out a few things, but he is completely on board with controlling high healthcare costs. And you're going to have an entrepreneurial governor in me that no one has tackled that before. When it comes to balancing education, getting that right, getting folks that need to go to college, need a skills-based education. You look at the other issues. We've talked about some: high utility costs, water, affordable housing, rural broadband, childcare. Who do you think is going to get that done with a supermajority? And I agree, we have become complacent over 20 years. Mitch Daniels came, and it was run by the other side of the aisle, and it was a state in the red financially. That's what happened after 16 years of Democrats running our state. But if you want someone who's a problem solver, of all Republicans got more done on healthcare, education, and agriculture than any other senator, and can do that in just 6 years, pay attention to that.
To clarify here in 15 seconds, you said you can pick out some things. Are there things he has said that you wish he hadn't said?
There are going to be things that you can pick out on anybody wishing they haven't said it.
And what are they?
I'm going to say, I'm not going to itemize them, but he has been mostly in line with faith, family, community, freedom, and opportunity, and Hoosiers are hearing that.
Ms. McCormick, your running mate, Terry Gooden, has gone against some of the traditional Democratic Party positions in the past on both abortion and marriage equality and some of his previous votes. How do you assure those who vote for you that you'll deliver on those issues? And what role will your LG play in your administration if elected? A minute for you on that question as well.
Yeah, my LG isn't a problem. The entire party is behind him. He's got bipartisan support. He knows a lot of Republicans. He is well received. I picked him because of his character, because he is competent and his commitment to service. I have no worries about Terry Gooden, nor does the state of Indiana. It also comes to remind us that that person is a heartbeat away from being the governor of Indiana. And let's talk about the lieutenant governor on the other candidate on the other side. He has proclaimed to be a white Christian nationalist. He is a book banner. He is comparing vaccines to rape at a time where women are fighting for our reproductive freedoms. He also is name calling. I mean, really? To call people Jezebel spirits that we're running for governor? I am a 20-year public servant. I'm a mom. I'm a farm family. I am committed to Hoosiers, and that's the best he can give. And again, it's about an apology, and it also is about owning up. I mean, until we have that, it's ridiculous. He's dangerous.
Mr. Braun, 30 seconds if you wish for a rebuttal or if you wish.
So
to
when you're
defend some of those
focusing
points.
on a lieutenant governor, that means you're shaky on what your own plans are going to be. Obviously, in this state, a governor is going to call the shots. And if you want a governor that has now changed policy from what you were just before, or you want a strong, steady hand that's proven you can get things done on the biggest stage, coming in to fix our issues, when you focus on that, that means you're afraid you don't have enough to offer Hoosiers. They're going to address kitchen table issues.
Okay, we've got 15 seconds. If you wish
I'm
to
not
respond.
afraid to lead, because I know leading is about addressing kitchen table issues, about the economy. But I also know too, and I'm crystal clear, it's about character. We need someone at the top of that ticket who will represent us well at the national level, and who will also have a running mate who will serve us well.
Real quick, top of the ticket, that's me. If you
Again,
want, if
you
you
have
want
not
to take
apologized,
on my
sir.
character,
Jezebel
just
spirit,
ask
sir.
anyone that
Okay.
knows me, and that's going to be a hard case to make.
We've got to leave it there because we do have a number of kitchen table and other
Yes.
issues to get to here tonight.
So for our next question, we want to turn things over now to Jessica Costello. She's from our station WEHT out in Evansville.
Many of Indiana's favorite roads feel like they're constantly under construction or are in disrepair. At the same time, INDOT is raising flags that its revenue sources could fall short in the coming years as gas tax revenues may decline. So what is your plan to make sure the state's roads are maintained and improved?
We send that question first to you, Ms. McCormick. What is your plan for road infrastructure here in Indiana? And 60 seconds, please, for your response.
Yeah, so the infrastructure issue is beyond roads, and I think we're all aware of that. And everything in this is expensive, whether it's connectivity with broadband, whether it's our bridges, whether it's our watershed dams, whether it's our sewers, whether it's our water pipes. The list goes on. And I do think after 20 years of a Republican supermajority one-party rule, it has gotten away from us, and it is incredibly expensive. Do I think this is going to be solved overnight? Heavens no, because we just got a report that the price tag is so much more than our revenue will be. So we've got to have a plan in order to prioritize. I know I'm hearing a lot about US 30, which I support. US 31 has needs. What doesn't have a need is a mid-state corridor, but there are just a lot of road issues that are coming up that we do need to address with a plan, with the right people at the table. It's critical to our economic development. My opponent voted against the infrastructure bill that brought Indiana over $6 billion in that infrastructure space. And that's really unfortunate because the work that we see going on now was a result of that. And we've got a lot more to do.
Ms. McCormick, thank you. And you made mention there of that $2.4 billion shortfall estimated for NDOT. So, Mr. Braun, I turn the question now to you. What's your plan to improve Indiana roadways? 60 seconds.
This is going to be an easy one because I think this election is going to be about who Hoosiers think have a track record and a steady hand and a record of leadership. She was in government for a short period of time, and we were in the 35th ranking when that was her job. I went to the state legislature because a lot of Indiana doesn't have the infrastructure it needs. And I think the question is on roads and bridges. Well, first year I was there, weighed in on it and was there just 3 years when was asked to co-author that bill. Most legislators that get there aren't being asked to do that unless they know something about the subject matter. I come from a part of the state that has suffered from a lack of infrastructure. I went there to improve upon it, did an entrepreneurial bill with skin in the game that will help local areas actually weigh in on their own destiny. I've heard nothing like that out of her.
Mr. Braun, thank you. 15 seconds if you'd like for a rebuttal.
Sure. I think what he's referring to is the plan that he came up with where they kept continuing to raise our gas taxes. And that is simply not sustainable. We need to look at other ways to look at more sustainable dollars that would come in for that infrastructure. The way they tried it and the way they did it simply didn't work. But boy, we felt it at the gas pumps and increases.
Ms. McCormick, thank you. Jen.
We recently learned that Indiana hospitals and insurance providers are being sued, accused of ignoring overpaid Medicaid claims. Now, the lawsuit says that the state cost the state $700 million. Ms. McCormick, will you take steps to get that money back for Hoosiers? And what would you do about this issue?
Yeah, I've been on the phone to a lot of families who are quite upset because their children or adults are not receiving the services that they don't only need, but they deserve. And it was so sudden for many of them. Also, there is such a waiting list to get those services. Many of them had family caregivers that are no longer allowed to do that or can do that if they take a massive cut. A third of Indiana is on Medicaid. That's massive. And so we have a lot of questions about what exactly happened. And we've heard a lot of stories, but I will tell you, having been in charge of a state agency over half of the state's budget, I would have had some answers if I would have had a shortfall or misappropriated money to that degree. So we have a lot of work to do in Medicaid. We're going to have to take some steps toward fixing it, but a lot of those services are immediate and they are in need.
Mr. Braun, you mentioned healthcare earlier. Same question to you here. 60 seconds. What would you do about this problem?
So Medicaid, obviously a cost-sharing plan that we have for healthcare for those that can't afford it. Again, broken in general because it ends up costing too much. And to make sure that we're going to be able to afford our share of it, it's going to take someone that has taken on healthcare in the past. Just because you run an agency, that doesn't mean you can translate that into doing something that will be a lot more complicated than any other aspect of state government. In my own business 16 years ago, I took on high healthcare costs. All I can tell you, entrepreneurially. We cut costs by over 50% through every wellness and prevention tool at it, have not had premium increases in 16 years. No one else has done that. Our own state needs to start embracing transparency and competition to make sure our costs of health care are lower. That is how we start lowering Medicaid costs and our share of it.
I want to address the comment
Very
about
briefly, we've got to move on to closing statements.
about
15 seconds.
running an agency. The agency was the Department of Education, and if we get better education, we get higher wages, and we will fix this Medicaid issue.
Okay, we have reached the final moments here of our debate, so we will move now to our closing statements
We
tonight.
start first with you, Ms. McCormick. 30 seconds.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you to both of you, to Dan Bierschel. Thank you very much to Fox. Mr. Braun, thank you for agreeing to be here. To the Hoosiers who are listening, thank you for being informed, and please go inform others. I am Jennifer McCormick. I'm a fifth generation farm family. I understand the importance of having a governor who will fight for our freedoms, particularly reproductive freedoms and academic freedoms, and respect parental rights. I promise you, when I become your governor, I will fight for you and make Indiana proud. I welcome all, and I approve it, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Braun. Now to you, 30 seconds.
It's going to be very clear. My wife and I decided to move back to our hometown long ago. She started her own business. I did shortly after that. 3 of our 4 kids run it now. That's the American dream. Turn the lights on in the morning, off in the evening, and everything in between. I served on the biggest stage here as your U.S. Senator, and thank you for getting me there. The opportunities here at home are so great, and I'm one that solves problems, knows how to get it done. I want to take Hoosier families to a place they've never been before.
Senator
Thank
Braun,
you.
Dr. McCormick, thank you both, and thank you at home for watching tonight. Good night.